Okay. Hello and welcome. My name is Dafna Adler. I'm a counselor here at Los Altos High School, and this is Countdown to College 2022. We are really excited to present these great workshops, and this particular workshop is focused on international study, which if you know me, is like my favorite topic, and I'm really excited to speak with students about it. It's a little bit of an unexpected topic for some of our families, just like something a lot of people hadn't thought about or don't know a ton about, and are actually really surprised to learn that it is very affordable and approachable compared to a lot of American universities. And I think that for a lot of people, when you first hear about that topic, it's like, oh gosh, that must cost a fortune, and it's just big and scary and really difficult to navigate. And I hope that by the end of this workshop, you will be able to see that actually it's really, really doable for a lot of students. And then at the end, we'll do questions. So if you do have questions, please hold them and then put them into the chat, and then I will answer those at the end. We have a pretty quick half hour, so I will get through a lot of material here. Okay, so why? We have so many universities in the US. Why go elsewhere? There are many, many great reasons, several of which I will share with you here. So, you know, in the US, we've got close to 4,000 universities, lots of different ones, and they offer a lot. But for students who are looking for something a little bit different, this is a really fantastic opportunity. Students will really benefit from exploring the world and experiencing life in a different culture. The magnitude of that is really, really hard to express in on a slide. If anyone here has traveled before, if you can recall, you know, some of the first times that you have seen some of your favorite places and how much excitement and wonder that entails when students go abroad, they're surrounded by that every day, and that becomes their life. And they kind of just get used to being citizens of the world. And it's really, really exciting and opens up a lot of opportunities. Students also learn how to function pretty quickly as independent adults, which is a great thing. There are some differences with American colleges in that regard, so I'll go into that in a little bit. Students will also be exposed to not only a lot of educational experiences, but also professional experiences. They will build a lot of really neat contacts and just opportunities that they may not get domestically. Finally, for some institutions, it's actually easier to get in as an international student. So there are many very prestigious universities abroad that would rival our most prestigious universities. And because schools abroad really, really want American students, it is actually sometimes easier to get into some of those. So really, really cool opportunities. All right. What kinds of programs are available internationally? So this can look a lot of different ways. So it is absolutely not a one size fits all. What we're focusing on tonight is students studying for their full degree, which would be 3 to 4 years at an institution outside of the US. That may not be for everyone, and I'm going to go into reasons why or why not in a moment. If that is not the right thing at this time, other ways that students can do that would be enrolling at an American university and then studying abroad for a semester or a year or a summer term during their 4 years at their American school. There are many, many programs, and I think that has grown quite a lot over the years as well. I think some of those things used to be limited, you know, back in the day, and now pretty much everywhere really encourages students to consider going abroad, and there are just tons of ways to do that. That's probably currently the most common option, is doing one of these like shorter programs. Also, some universities have campuses abroad, like full-on campuses, like NYU has campuses in Abu Dhabi and in Shanghai. Temple University has one in Tokyo, so there are many ways to do that as well. And finally, graduate school. If this sounds interesting as a student, but you're like, oh gosh, I'm not sure if I'm ready for that right now. That's okay. You might decide to do that for grad school, or you might do one of these shorter options and then later decide, I loved my study abroad so much, I want to go back. That's pretty common too. So many ways to do this. As for what kind of students would be a good fit, so definitely there are some realities to be aware of here. So this is not for everyone, and nothing ever is, right? We want to have options for all students to consider. So this can be a great fit for students who are independent, adapt easily to new or ambiguous situations. They can kind of pivot quickly if like something doesn't totally go according to plan. Students who are willing to take healthy risks, students who are comfortable communicating with adults and strangers on their own. And that's just kind of part of navigating daily life. Those who are able to function successfully away from home, potentially far from home. Students who are looking for a different or unique college experience than a lot of their peers. And those who are excited to experience life in a foreign culture and just be like immersed in that, which is very different than taking a short trip. And some students like are so excited to do that. So this is a perfect thing to consider. Also, there are many students in our schools who have dual citizenship and language proficiency. So that's another great reason that can open up even more options. Students do often ask, well, don't I have to speak another language to go study abroad? And the answer is no. There are actually English speaking options almost everywhere. But if a student does, for example, speak French and they want to go to France or Belgium or Quebec, that opens up even more doors. All right, and then the flip side of this is there are some challenges. So this is not an easy experience. It's, every day you walk out the door, you are faced with life in another country. And so that can be, really, really difficult on a daily basis sometimes. So being far from home, navigating these new systems can be hard. There is a lot of support for that, which I'll get to a little bit later in the presentation. Student life on campus is likely to be really different than American schools. Campuses often look different. They don't necessarily have the same sort of student life. So that takes a bit of getting used to. If students are looking for the typical, American campus life, like college athletics, frats and sororities, that they're not going to find too much there. So that would be maybe not the best fit. So if that is not high on your priority list, then this is great. Another challenge is that often students do have to know what they want to study when they are applying. There are not so many opportunities to change majors and kind of change directions. So that for some students might make it not the right thing right now if they're undecided. And then finally, students who are experiencing any of these sorts of issues down here below, current physical or mental health condition that requires regular monitoring or treatment, difficulty navigating in ambiguous situations or without parents nearby, being far from home, and even just sometimes if it's their first time away from family. So these things can make it challenging. And if the student is dealing with these actively, it's something to consider about whether this is right now. It doesn't mean never. Or if you are a younger student and this sounds pretty cool to you, but you're struggling with some things at this moment and you want to be ready when you graduate for this kind of experience, this is a great thing to think about. What can I do to get myself healthy and ready? And what skills do I need to practice to be ready for this sort of thing? Okay. All right. How does this all work? If you're like, okay, I'm sold, sounds great. How does this work? So the answer to, as it is for many college things, is it depends. Different universities and countries are going to have different admission requirements, policies, procedures. So you have to do a lot of research. It's best to start this process as early as you can. That being said, even for seniors right now who maybe just learned about this and are like, oh, wow, this sounds cool. I want to find out more. There is actually time in a lot of places. But for younger students, they tend to be able to plan a lot better because there are some differences that are helpful to know about ahead. So some universities have similar admission criteria as the US, or they're at least trying to mirror it so that it's easier because they're trying to recruit Americans. So they'll be looking at GPA, grades, rigor of curriculum, essays, et cetera. Whereas other countries and universities are looking largely at standardized test scores because their system is really different. So for example, in the United Kingdom, they've traditionally looked mostly at standardized test scores like AP exams or SATs. That has been flipped a bit upside down in recent times due to COVID because SAT and ACT were not as available over the past couple of years. So even they have gone largely test optional. That may be temporary, but they've had to be flexible. So it varies, and that's where a lot of research comes in. And then schools in non-English speaking countries may also have a language requirement or test. So that's something to look into as well. All right, and how much does this cost? This is a huge question. Again, if you're like, great, sounds awesome, what are we talking here in dollars? You're likely going to be pleasantly surprised, somewhere between there and shocked. It actually costs more often than not a fraction of what we pay in the US, especially for a private university or out-of-state public school. You're paying out-of-state tuition. Tuition at a UC or CSU is still probably going to be cheaper. However, room and board tend to cost more here, whereas cost of living abroad is often cheaper. So it can sometimes balance out. But in terms of tuition, we'll start with that. So in most countries, it just starts off with a much, much, much lower price tag than here. It's just, funding in different countries is different than we do it here. And also most universities abroad are public, not always, but the large majority are public, not private. Another thing is that in many countries, such as in the UK, some programs in Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, programs are often 3 years, not 4 years, which shaves 25% off the top already for being 1 year shorter. So it's quite affordable, and many universities take FAFSA now, and many are trying to get onto FAFSA, and B, many are starting to offer more and more merit aid for students, for international students. So really, really great opportunities to do this at a low cost. Another thing I want to mention, which I don't think I have anywhere on the slides, but there are some majors in many countries that here cost like a kind of a fortune, because it's like you do your undergrad and then your graduate school, like medical school, law school, dentistry, veterinary medicine, pharmacy, things like that, or like a 2-part degree here. In many countries, they do what's called direct entry, where you go directly into that program, and that is what you're studying. You're not doing liberal arts and electives. That's the case for most degrees anyway. But when you're talking about a professional degree like this, it shortens the degree quite a bit because it's one single program. So that also brings down the cost quite a lot. So I could really talk about this for hours, and I'm apologize, I'm racing through this material because there's a lot to talk about, but feel free at the end to ask questions about all these things. All right, living situations. So this is quite different sometimes as well. Where do students live? Most of the international housing is going to be apartment style. So that means a few things. Students will often be cooking and cleaning for themselves. There are some residence halls that do have what they call catered meals in the UK, meaning like a meal plan, but often students are cooking and cleaning. One of the absolute coolest things is that whatever the living situation is, almost always the default is that students have a single dorm room. So they'll either be in like a suite style apartment, or if they are in a residence hall, they'll have their own room, sometimes also their own bathroom. And then there will often be like a common area that's shared by, a half dozen students or so. They think, meaning like pretty much everyone outside the US, thinks it's nuts that our students are stacking up, in doubles, triples, and quads in a dorm room. So I think that's a really lovely thing. And every student really does get their own little corner, which is important. And there are ways to make this even just a little bit cheaper, because while that is usually the default, if a student is trying to save even more money, they can sometimes request to be put into a double to make the housing a little bit cheaper. So many, many ways that this can look. And again, as I mentioned before, students learn to live as independent adults a lot faster. They are working with their suite mates or apartment mates around, who's cooking which nights, who does the shopping, and kind of negotiating these sort of roommate household things. Some universities do offer, or I should say most universities do offer housing arrangements, or at least assistance if they don't have their own. Then they will help students, certainly in that first year, to find housing. Many universities will guarantee first year international housing. And then beyond that, it's kind of like here where students meet their friends and then they'll want to move off campus, things like that. It's pretty similar. Once in a while, students will have to find their own, but from my experience working with a lot of reps, there's almost always some level of support in finding it. Okay, when do students choose a major? So this is, again, as I mentioned before, one of the challenges. It really depends on the system. A lot of times, students in high schools abroad are already kind of in a vocational track. And so they are expected to be applying into a specific major, right from the beginning. So our students do need to know more or less what they want to study. So there might be a little bit of wiggle room in it. It does depend, like in Ireland, there are some places where it's a bit flexible. Scotland is a little bit flexible, but students in general should be prepared for that. Okay, and then support, super important. We know you, if you are a student, are going halfway across the world, or if you are a parent, you're sending your child halfway across the world. That's hard, that's far away. And the colleges really, really want families to feel secure in knowing that the student has a lot of support on campus. So not only in the application process, which is highly personalized, but also once students get there, there's often going to be an international office, an international student resource center, staff who are dedicated to international students. Most colleges are going to have some kind of a club or organization, or like an international student society. So there are many, many ways for students to connect with other international students and to get support, whether it's healthcare, mental health, learning the systems in the country where they're living, things like that. All right, so that's the end of the information. This is a slide that I made of all the universities abroad that I have personally visited, and I'm going to see some more in the UK this summer, which I'm super excited about. And then I just have a few slides of photos. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We have approximately 10 minutes. Oh, that's good. So this was my very first university tour in 2017, 5 years ago, in Ireland. So if you want to go to school in a castle, you can do that. University College Cork, incredibly beautiful. They're all really kind of wonderful in their own ways, but you can go to school in castle. This was Scotland a few years back. Also very castle-like situations here. Wales as well. Just these are beautiful, beautiful old universities. And actually in the UK, they have what they call the ancient universities, which are the ones that are like hundreds and hundreds of years old, and then the more modern ones. And there's a huge range of that. This is a handful of schools from Italy. And I want to also drive home the point, which I didn't mention yet, that the students' surroundings are an extension of the classroom, right? And that holds true anywhere they go, right? If you are somewhere else in the world, your city that you're in or country that you're in is an extension of what you are learning. So if you are, for example, studying something like history or anthropology or archaeology, and you're in, Rome or just kind of anywhere ancient, right? It's vastly different than studying that here. I was a study abroad student for a year in Paris as a French major. I had never taken an art class because I wasn't really interested in it. And I had to take an art history class for graduation. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll take it in Paris. That makes sense. It was life-changing. I had my classes in the museums, like looking at Van Gogh paintings in front of me and Monet paintings, not on slides in an auditorium. It was an absolutely life-changing experience. So these are kind of things that are quite different than studying here. So anyway, these are just a handful of photos. A few more here. Those are also from Rome. And this photo is from Wales, from the Snowdonia National Park in Wales that I got to see, which was just like breathtaking. So, all right. Any questions? I know that was a ton of information that I just threw at you. So I hope that there are some questions. Anyway, no questions. Okay. Well, minutes. Oh, how difficult is it to transfer into? Oh, that's a great question. So it's a bit different. It's difficult to transfer from university to university. But from here, this is actually another pathway. I should add that to the slide. For students who are interested in this, but are thinking about starting off, for example, at Foothill. Either they're not quite ready, they don't have the grades that they need for a certain university they want to go to, for many of the same reasons why one would start at community college here. The universities abroad are often very much open to transfer students. It's quite easy. And what they want to see is that the student has done well in college level coursework. And if the student can show that, it's actually really, really pretty simple and easy. Next question, how and when do we apply? So that's a great question as well. And it varies. A lot of universities abroad have a much later timeline than we do, which is really nice. Like I'll use the UK and Ireland again as an example. In the UK, their main deadline is January 26th. However, they're going to give you what's called a conditional offer. So they would say you need to graduate, you need to get this score on a couple of AP exams or whatever other conditions they give you. If you do that, by the end of the year, you're guaranteed that spot. So one difference is that if you have to take the SAT or ACT, here to apply for senior year, you're done in December. That's the latest you can take it. If you are doing that for a school abroad, you can take it all the way to the end of your senior year. So it's quite flexible. And then somebody was asking about Italy. I don't know off the top of my head. You would just have to look on the website for the institution, because Italian universities are a bit tricky because often you'll be studying in Italian. So you would have to really check a lot of requirements and timelines. There are a couple of American universities in Rome, American University of Rome, which I have visited, and John Cabot University, which I have visited as well. And so they're pretty easy because they're on the American system, but within the Italian system, it's a little bit difficult to navigate. Okay, we've got just a few more minutes. Insight on the University of Amsterdam. That's a great question. The Dutch system is one that I have not tackled yet. It's a very vast world that I'm also still learning about, and I'm quite curious about Dutch schools. It's also a very different system than here. So that is on my radar to learn more about. When in doubt, go to the website. There's always going to be a section for international students, and there's almost always a person or a staff dedicated to international students that can answer the questions that you have. It's very, very personalized. And for students interested in like some of the schools where I have visited, I can put you in touch with their dedicated people. Is it easy to apply for a master's degree or above degree in the US? After doing an undergrad, generally, yes. Now there are some things, it depends on the field. If a student is going into, let's say, a field that requires licensing, so education, right, to be a teacher or law or medicine, you do have to do the research about licensing and coming back to practice here. So it does vary. For the most part, if a student is studying something that's not dependent on licensing, it is generally not an issue. Like, degrees are recognized here and quite prestigiously in many cases. So yeah, it's not a problem to come back and apply for graduate school here. Do credits transfer back to the US? CSU and UC system. I'm not quite sure what that means. The student wouldn't be transferring credits back there. They would do their whole degree. So it would be a little bit different. If a student is studying abroad through a UC or CSU for a semester, as I mentioned at the beginning, they would have to work with their university. That would completely depend on the program, but generally it should if they're promoting that program. Do they recognize our high school diploma that is 4 years if their high school is 5 years? Completely depends. I would imagine generally yes, but that completely depends on the system or the country. All right, we have to wrap up as we have another session starting in just a moment. I can take one or two last quick questions. If anybody has any more questions. No? Okay, all right. Well, thank you all for joining me tonight. I hope that this was helpful for you. And we have a really terrific international college fair coming up on April 20th at Los Altos High School right after school. So I really hope that students will come and check it out. That's really exciting because it's in person for the first time in 2 years. So have a great night and thank you again.